Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next edition of On the Park Bench. I'm really excited about our lineup today. We're going to be hearing from 4 developers who are active in all sorts of the development phase. So On the Park Bench is brought to you by CNU. We created it as a platform for members to get together and to talk and discuss and debate about where we are in addressing so many of the issues that we're facing in this time of coronavirus and COVID. A lot of our friends and family are getting sick. Some people are passing away. The world is upside down. And we wanted to create a space because where we can talk about this. At the end of the day, new urbanists are innovators. We're problem solvers. We figure this out and we move forward. And now more than ever, we really need to be doing that. For example, we had to cancel the CNU 28 in-person meeting in Minneapolis, and I hope that you will all join us online for the virtual Congress. We already have close to 1,000 people signed up. We're going to have about 64 sessions at this juncture, and it keeps adding every day. So go to cnu.org/CNU28 to register. Today, we're going to hear from, as I said, 4 amazing folks who are deeply engaged in all aspects of development. Grant Humphreys founded Carlton Landing, a DPZ-designed lakefront resort community in southwest Oklahoma. He has 24 years experience in real estate development and investments, and he's also just this really nice guy. Aaron Lubeck is a designer and builder practicing in Durham, North Carolina. He particularly specializes in complex neighborhood infill projects, zoning codes, and unique financing stacks. He's also on the faculty of the Incremental Development Alliance. I had the pleasure of meeting Rob Parker, oh Lord, I don't know now, 2-3 years ago, and then we got to know each other quite well when we biked together from Charleston, South Carolina to Savannah a few years ago. But Rob has over 30 years experience in organizational leadership at a local, national, and international level. And he's the president of Pinewood Forest, which is this amazing new urbanist development right across the street from Marvel Studios. I didn't quite fully understand that until I went there. I was like, wait, there's Marvel. That's where all the Marvel things are filmed. All the Marvel films are produced. Monica Johnson is the president of New Urban Connections, a sale and marketing consulting firm for developers that create great places based on the principles of new urbanism. And she's also the director of the National Town Builders Association. All of the speakers today are associated with NTBA. And with that, I am going to turn this over to Grant. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and particularly thanking our speakers for coming together and talking about what is the pandemic's impact on real estate. What does your magic 8-ball say? So Grant, take it away.
Thanks, Lynn. Hey, glad to be with everybody today. Thank you, Lynn, for the chance to come out. As we're putting this series together, or today's panel, we're looking for ways that we could tell different aspects of the same stories. We're all trying to understand how COVID-19 impacts our business. What I'm going to do is do a share of and an overview of 2 presentations that we've had over the last couple weeks, and the way that we're doing practical application for that. And so this will be the practically responding to COVID-19. I'm going to try to run through these slides quickly. At the bottom of each slide, you can see that I've added a tiny URL, .com/grant-ntba. So if you want to go back and see this presentation, you can download it off the internet. But on April 21st, 2 weeks ago, I gave a presentation to NTBA. Quick overview, we looked at the time frame and the impact of COVID-19, realized over several years, and a helpful analogy would be a blizzard that lasts a few weeks. We've gone through that now. A winter that lasts several months. That's what we're in right now, followed by a little ice age. And the little ice age is a multi-year event that changes the way that we live and interact. We looked at CRE sectors and knowing that all property sectors would be impacted, but hospitality, restaurant, retail, those are taking the brunt of it. I don't think that's hard to see. You could see that if anyone's in the restaurant business, they've been impacted immediately. We also discussed how the office sector could be delayed, have a delayed impact, but as employees are coming back in and additional social distancing within the office could change the configuration of the future workplace. We looked at credit markets and looking at loan default projections, which are projected to peak in the fourth quarter of 2021 if you look at how these different property types might impact. And this is from a group called Trepp Bank Research, looking at hospitality and retail taking the brunt of it, multifamily and industrial down at just about 3%. And so some property sectors have a chance to get through this without huge impact. We also talked about the outmigration of gateway cities. If you look over the last several years, you see that major metro areas have seen a decline in net migration. Second tier cities, tertiary markets are the winners here because they're more affordable and they have a higher quality of life available, especially when you take restaurants and a lot of the cultural amenities of our gateway cities out. And so we thought, how would that impact cities? And how would it also impact urban patterns? And we found that there's really some good encouraging news looking at urban patterns showing how walkable communities which have proximity to an urban core are really slated to win. Just in terms of our own experience in Carlton Landing, we've seen a huge surge in market activity. We sold 6 houses this past weekend because people from Oklahoma City or Dallas are seeing a place like Carlton Landing as a safe place to escape, and instead of flying to Disneyland or the Rockies or East or West Coast, they want to drive to destinations. So that's an encouraging bit. Here, another presentation the next week. Andreas did a great job last week. You can look it up at Andreas-NTBA on tinyurl. But he talked about the post-traumatic development. How do we adapt to the decline technologically as we see a decline in systems of governance and the built environment? How do we respond to that? And that the crisis is a community crisis. So as we respond to this economic and cultural crisis, New Urbanism already has provided a good solution. It's a partial solution in his mind with a built form that works, but there's a need to adjust governance structures which address these new fears, new concerns, and new desires found in the market in response to COVID-19. And then also looking at the time frame and saying, okay, immediately we need to restore confidence. In the intermediate, stranger is the danger, community is the support, services will recede. And in the long term, going back to global warming and climate change, nature is the danger, community is protection as governments really strain and possibly fail. So in this presentation, Andreas was giving this look of what type of built environment might respond to COVID-19. I just want to give just a couple slides. So this is Carlton Landing, and I want to show how we took this influence from Andreas and Korkut, his architect, how we let those ideas evolve and how we look to practically apply them in a built environment like Carlton Landing. So here's our master plan. The master built environment currently is development areas down in the lower right-hand corner. Up on the upper left, you have an area around our farm that is raw land, it's flat. And just in terms of scale, that map is 2 miles wide. So it's about 1.5 miles wide showing that. So we've got about 1,000 acres in this master plan area. As we look at this, I said, let's take a 300 by 500 piece of land that's flat and rectilinear, divide it into half-acre lots so that we can use septic tanks, minimize our sewage infrastructure required, put them around a common green with 15-foot setbacks, add in a common area pedestrian corridor on the 5-foot adjacent to each lot where we put a sidewalk. Also zone the lots so that they're zoned for vehicular storage, residential, and each one has a contiguous space courtyard in the middle. With that zoning in place, what we do is see it possibly sold off in the first round to look like this, and then incorporating the SKY method, which came out of a DPZ charrette many years ago, seeing it continue to be sold out as the owners have the ability to sell the remainder of their land and become mini developers. We see this as something that would create a courtyard environment providing for private outdoor space, response to COVID-19, response to climate change, and that could be spread over several blocks. As you look at our master plan here, which was made up of single family lots, now applying this concept to Carlton Landing and having something that might look like this in the first phase, but could be built out to good urbanism over the longer term. I spoke with Andreas this morning. We're working on this plan now and looking at putting it into practice even this year in Carlton Landing. So that's my presentation. I'll hand it back over. And going to Aaron next. Aaron, you're up.
Let's see. Can you unshare your screen? It says I cannot share while you are sharing. There you go. All right. That is a great presentation and really fascinating stuff. I really think Andre's thoughts on this are worthy of more exploration. So thanks for Lynn and Claire for putting this on. I think this park bench stuff is great. And I want to chime in a little bit on my experiences from 2008 and how I think they're relevant to this crisis as well. I'm a designer builder, one of the smaller guys in the National Town Builder Association, and primarily work on small infill projects. The biggest lessons I would say is to get prepared. Most people in urbanism are small actors. This is an extremely capital intensive industry, and most people being small have limited capacity to either mentally process downturns or financially process them. The biggest thing of all of this talk is that know that risk takers are under extraordinary risk right now. That is personally, that is project-wise, that is professionally. And I think it's important to check in with, people who have their own business or people who are developing anything from a duplex to a huge T&D. Check in with them personally, make sure they're doing okay, see if they need anything. Because while we're all under pressure, people who are building their communities, there's sort of another level thing to that. Know also that in 2008, a lot of development, the crisis lagged the crash of Lehman Brothers by about 12 to 24 months. And this is what I'm seeing in development right now, is most of the architects and builders I know are still working. It's not like projects dried up, and most of our things have a long sort of horizon to them. What's happening though is that the projects that were scheduled to come online in 2021 or 2022 are all getting axed. And so while there is work sort of lingering, the challenge is that we may see the biggest pain to our members and professionals in the field of new urbanism about a year or two out. So get prepared for that. And mostly that means getting liquid, however you can, whether it's home equity lines on your own home or figuring out how you can stay liquid to get through a downturn is critical. And that, I think, was a lesson from 2008. So there are threats and opportunities, and they should be looked at somewhat separately. The threats are, a client not paying you, a subcontractor going belly up where you have to backstop their work, clients just becoming sort of hitting a breaking point mentally for whatever reason, and that being a threat to your business. But I would also underscore that there are opportunities for many of the younger people in the new urbanism, people who entered this in the last 7, 8, 9 years. Many of them have had no opportunity to buy anything, whether it's their own home or a duplex or a bar or start anything. There have not been opportunities because we just finished the longest expanse of growth, I think, in American history. And so when I look at, I'm 44 years old, but the vast majority of everything I own, which is really the things I'm going to work on for the next 20 years of my life, were acquired right after the 2008 crash. So if you're young and you're looking for opportunities, this may be your first opportunity to truly see that in your career, and I think you should be prepared for that. So there is some benefits to come out of this crisis. In particular, incremental urbanism will be hit very hard, as it was in 2008. This is for a lot of reasons, but housing over the last 10 years, coming out of 2008, has become radically more political. This is most common in our urban environments, most common in our progressive cities. But the rules, which have been increasing really for 100 years or last 50 years, have accelerated in the last 10, are creating a monoculture that is antithetical to new urbanism. Lending is doing the same thing. What you can actually get financed is compressing, and that, unfortunately, what is good urbanism doesn't fit in the standard boxes. And under crisis, when banks lend less and less, it's even more so. So this is a huge problem. In the incremental world, cash becomes king, and particularly in our poorer cities where things are, you just can't get things financed under $100,000. More and more projects have to be exclusively in cash. That's a headwind on urbanism, but is also the reality. And so again, it gets back to having liquidity is critical in times like these. So almost inherently, small developers have less liquidity and less tolerance for politics, so they're less able to clear these entry thresholds. If you need a lawyer to participate, you're less likely to ever do your project. If you need to hire 3 consultants or go through 3 special permissions process to do your project, you're less likely to ever get in. And under pressure, projects die. And as John Anderson likes to say, developers become former developers. So the good news out of all of this is that these problems are almost entirely regulatory issues. Under sane rules, which we ultimately need to return to, incrementalism would thrive. This is actually more so under a crisis because demand for unique projects inherent to urbanism is off the charts. When people are, when unemployment rises, people need to look for alternative living situations, whether they're duplexes or ADUs or co-living or co-housing or LiveWorks or whatever. The demand for these rise. And so this is the sweet spot for incremental development. The challenge is that close to none of it is legal, and that is the fight of our time. So it was true in 2008. It's even more true now. In my mind, unequivocally, special permissions are the #1 threat to executing new urbanism. So we see this in that form follows finance. You can only build what you can get financed. It's also somewhat true that form follows what's buildable by right. So increasingly, people will only build what they can build by right, and the tolerance to deal with BS or a public process is actually lowered substantially since 2008. I expect that that will continue, and we see this in the NTBA quite a bit, but the willingness to take on this sort of non-risk taker input into your project has reached an all-time low to the point where it's almost a non-starter. So the builders that are required to do don't have entitlement and require a public process increasingly are just passing on those projects. So I think that is a huge problem, both the planning profession, but also within our urban professions as well. So this process, what it results in ultimately is fewer and fewer new urban or urban projects are viable. What comes out of the sausage maker is suburbanism, which is, again, the opposite of what we want. So there's just fewer builders willing to fight those rules and behaviors of the establishment, whether it's NIMBYism or entitlement, and over time they exit the market. I think Chuck Marone's doing the most interesting work on this. Collapse does not look like an abandoned house. It looks like builders exiting the market, and they never see it. And the civic side, because they can't see that, they have a cognitive dissonance to not process this. We hear this all the time from cities. I still see the permits being applied for. There can't be a problem. And so this cognitive dissonance is going to be a problem after this crisis. So this is really the missing middle problem, that the only thing you can get built are these single family homes and Texas donuts. And this wide breadth of urbanism has become increasingly illegal and accelerated over the last 10 years. With this crisis, it's going to be critical to re-legalize these, because the solutions for strong community and urbanism are all within that missing middle breadth. Without that, the small actor, the young actor, the immigrant, they can't participate, and monoculture results, mostly suburbanism. So to finish up, all of these writers are saying basically the same thing. Nassim Nicholas Taleb, both in Anti-Fragile and his excellent, more recent book, Skin in the Game, is saying the same thing that Chuck Marone is saying the same thing that Jane Jacobs said. This quote is from Jane Jacobs, whose incidentally 104th birthday was yesterday. Any culture that jettisons the values that have given it competence, adaptability, and identity become weak and hollow. A culture can avoid this hazard only by tenaciously retaining the underlying values responsible for the culture's nature and success. In America and the West, that's all, really the whole world, that's been incremental urbanism, that's been incremental building, the ability for young people, for immigrants, for renters, and the poor, roughly acronymed as Europe's, the ability to build at the fringe of your community. When that's happening, your community is healthy. When it's not, it's a canary in the coal mine that there's a collapse and failures going on. So the solutions are reestablishing those rights to build, depoliticizing housing. We don't talk about that enough, but I absolutely think it's critical coming out of this crisis. And in many of our communities, reestablishing that respect for the practitioners who are at risk to build community. So thank you.
All right, Aaron. So thank you very much. Next up, I think we're going to
Rob. Rob's up next.
Rob. Go for it, Rob. Rob, you're on mute right now, bud.
Okay. Yeah. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Yep.
All right, great. Well, I want to talk to you quickly about a project that is already underway, and this idea that we're right in the middle of our project. And what do you do when you've got 350 people living there, major growth happening, and things being built in a town center and residential. And so I'm going to walk quickly through it with my time, how we're managing kind of this pandemic and this crisis, and maybe give you the 5 quick steps that we are involved in to kind of manage our way through this. For some reason,
and Rob, I'm seeing your face. I wasn't seeing your screen.
Okay. Well, we're not sharing then. Let me do another quick one more time.
There you go.
See it now?
Yep. Thanks, Rob.
That's great. Well, it's still not advancing, so I'm not sure that's going to help me a lot. Let me just talk to you then directly. We're a project that's about 234 acres. We'll be a town for about 5,000 people living there. We are directly adjacent to a movie studio, the second largest movie studio in North America, Pinewood Atlanta Studios. And so our beachfront, if you will, is the studio. We're in an area that is just about 20 minutes from the Atlanta airport. And so we're adjacent and close to the city, but in a rural environment. And we are building 700 single family, multifamily homes, 600 multifamily apartments, and then about 300,000 square feet of commercial, retail, great restaurants, hotels, et cetera. And so we've got a town center and a residential area. And as I said, about 350 people living there. I guess I would start with this, is that I believe a situation like this is a leadership moment. People are watching us. They are paying attention to what it is that we're saying and doing. They're taking their cues from us as leaders, as developers. And so I think it's a time, as Aaron said, where people need to hear from us. They need to hear our voice. They need to get positive communication. They need to know that that we're on top of this, that we're in it with them. I think one of the recognitions for us is, although our core developer, as developers, we have huge investment in this. There are a lot of other partners that do as well, and these people who bought homes and bought into the lifestyle that we presented, they're very much invested, and they're part of this, and they need to be loved and cared for and communicated with. So we've been really clear about this and shared it directly with all of our builders, all of our partners, our residents, and have been sharing and communicating a 5-step plan. Step 1 is probably really obvious to all of you, but I think it needed to be said, is that our number 1 goal is to keep our people safe, to protect them, to make sure that they are that they don't get ill, that they don't spread this disease, and that we're doing everything we can, not just to protect ourselves legally, but to really go deeply in caring, creating the safest environment. We actually think that we may come out of this with a kind of a new strategy around how, if you're going to be in lockdown, this is where you want to be. If you're going to be quarantined, you want to be in a community like this that is safe, that's connected, where there's great communication, great sharing, and that is also an environment that is physically safe for you and is the cleanest place that you could live. So that was goal number 1. Goal number 2 was to protect our current investments and the things that we've already built, because we're already into this project, and make sure that our residents understood that their home values were going to maintain, we're going to be there because of the steps that we're taking. And our retailers that were just now coming on, who are in the middle of a TI build out right now, restaurants that are slated to open in the next 60 days, that we're here, that we're continuing, that we're making strategic investments. We, in part to do that, have just been really clear about priority setting, which is where I would say our third phase was. Our third step was preserving cash, and Aaron talked about liquidity. So for us, just like everybody else, if we're not selling lots, we're not making transactions, we have no income. And so for us, preserving cash was really important. I would say, though, we didn't do a spending freeze. We did what I have called a spending chill. And so we've chilled some of our spending, and we've gotten very strategic about what is it that would keep us moving forward during this season and what can wait. I've got about $17 million in projects that were set to be built in 2020 that are being pushed to 2021. And within those, each one of those are prioritized in case resources get freed up. But we are moving forward still with the things that are the most important to people, that are the most impactful for our residents to purchase, and for our builders to purchase lots to build houses, so more residents will buy and keep the thing moving. So preserving cash has been important, but you'll note it wasn't number one for us. Keeping people safe and protecting our current investments were the first two. But we do have to preserve cash. The fourth one then becomes probably the most important to me, to maintain and look towards the future, and that's maintaining consumer confidence and this idea of that we are making progress and moving forward. I would share with you that we had to embrace this idea that we can gain market share during a downtime. We can make progress. We can do very strategic things, even with limited resources. And we want to keep that consumer confidence very high. So we're showing progress. I am excited to tell you that this past weekend, as we begin to slowly open Georgia up as a state, it's like spring. We weren't closed, but there's new things coming up out of the ground. And we did food trucks, and we did coffee trucks, and we have done virtual tours, and now we're doing touchless kind of safe tours. And we wrote 2 contracts this weekend, and we took 3 reservations on our micro homes or tiny homes. In fact, those 10 micro homes are already spoken for, and we've got some in a phase that we haven't even designed yet. So there is some real positive progress coming. And then the last one for me is just to make sure that we are preparing to accelerate, so that all the things that we're doing, even the things that we put on hold, that we are continuing to do design work. And to Aaron's point, our architects and designers are still working because these things were already being in the works. But for us, we want to be shovel ready. So I would encourage you, if you can't put the shovel in the ground and get started, at least continue your permitting process, your design process, and get us far along. We want to grab market share as we're coming out of this. And so those are the 5 things that I would share with you. I'll tell you a couple other things that we've learned, that this pandemic, nobody anticipated that everybody, imagine this, everybody in your community is there every day, 24/7. They just don't go anywhere. And we're really looking forward to people getting out and going back home. There's a unique set of challenges when people are bored, when people have cabin fever, and when they just don't go. So that's what we're doing with our current project at Pinewood Forest, and I'll be happy to answer questions, but look forward to you hearing from Monica next.
Thank you. Well, I do not have a slide presentation, so I'm just going to dive right in. And I'm the sales and marketing person and the director of the NTBA. So what I did is take the opportunity to speak to a few of our NTBA members and to my developer clients, to see what they were doing and what their situation was. And sales offices are closed in some states. Obviously, some are open by appointment only. Others are staffed with just one person. So we're seeing that the walk-in traffic obviously is almost non-existent, and that broker traffic is down with some of our clients. And again, there are exceptions to this. Sales are down for some of our NTBA members. One developer mentioned that his numbers were down 50%, but another developer said his numbers are great. They're meeting April numbers from last year and predicting good things. I'm also hearing that custom homes and pre-sale packages that were already under contract are moving ahead with some exceptions, and that people are moving forward in that. We are seeing some buyers pausing a little bit. There is some concern, obviously, just like it was in 2008. Will they have a job? When will jobs come back? Will prices go down? Can I sell my house? So these are very important things. And Rob, I know I really appreciated your letter that went out to your homeowners and your prospects, letting them know about your 5-point plan, because it gives confidence. We are seeing some great news is that interest rates are down. They're just so low. It's a wonderful time for people to buy if they can. We're also seeing that applications for mortgages as of the end of April were up for sales, down a little bit for refis. But we have to remember that we're creating community. This is what I'm here over and over again about what people want. So what are developers doing about the pandemic now? And there's a number of things. They are, number one, examining their product. Grant, you just gave a good example of the compound, and I know that Andreas had spoken about the compound. So people are looking at product gaps, and they're focusing on market preferences. They're value engineering. Not too long ago, I was with a wonderful developer out in Providence in Shreveport, Louisiana, and Mike Watkins was out there doing a little mini charrette. And he said, would you walk through one of our homes and just tell me what you would take out? The house was magnificent. It's as if they had ordered every option that they possibly could have for a standard feature. So we suggested taking out some prices, and they were able to take out tens of thousands of dollars, again, becoming more competitive in the marketplace. You'd always want to take a look at that. We're seeing that people are focusing on both pre-sales and customs for developers. Selling that land is ever important. For pre-sales, if you can do that before you finance a spec by matching a home site with a home and get that under contract and package it and market it just as you would a speculative home, that's a good thing to do. And there are you can just do that. You can take a look at innovative partnerships. So for example, you may want to defer for a builder who would like this to defer the land price until the speculative home is under contract or closed. Grant Humphreys has mentioned and he can expand on this. He's talked about a project before where you sell at a discounted price, but then you enjoy the upside when it's sold to the end user. We're seeing that developers are realigning their marketing and sales budgets. Number one, they're taking a look at their staffing models. With less traffic, how many people do they need in the office? Should it be an in-house sales organization? Should it be outsourced? So take a look at your budget and see what's needed. Can you reassign some responsibilities? There's a wonderful developer in Arkansas who actually the salespeople also take over some of the social media roles. So that's something that they are doing. You might want to move dollars that you've earmarked for events and move that into social media and for internet marketing. Bob Turner with Habersham in North Carolina told me he is actually increasing his marketing budget. He said, Monica, people are at home. He said they're on their computer. And so he wants to make certain that people are hearing about Habersham. So do ramp up your social media and your internet marketing. Providence in Shreveport is using now a new Realtor.com program. They're just about to implement it now to secure qualified leads. And so I'm interested to see how that will go. But whatever you do, don't stop marketing. Don't stop communicating and sharing stories. Make certain that the developers are having safe showings. So everyone is seeing virtual showings and virtual events everywhere. But they are also sanitizing models and specs, allowing one person at a time or a couple at a time, no kids in some cases, no shoes, and lots of hand washing stations or hand sanitizers. Other developers are offering self-touring options. Harkness Estates in Greenville, South Carolina, is doing a number of things. Number one, they have only one salesperson on staff per day to respond to any questions. All of their home inventory are now equipped as talking homes so that people can get a talking tour. They are doing virtual tours, and they're also offering self-guided golf cart tours. So they're sanitizing their golf carts. Someone can come in and say, I really want to learn more about Harkness Estates. And they say, well, come by, you've got the golf cart. It's so nice and clean. They can get into any home that they have that is open and for sale, and then they can talk to the salesperson on staff. And they're really taking safety to new heights. Providence in Shreveport, Louisiana is reporting their InterNow system. It's almost like having a realtor lockbox program, except it's for John Q. Public. So I can come by, I can drive by, I can say, I really want to go into Providence, and I put in my driver's license, answer a couple of questions, and I can tour at my leisure. They're reporting increased traffic with this. So that's kind of a fun thing. East Beach, where I live here in Norfolk, Virginia, we've got the whole thing, Rob. We've got food trucks twice a week coming out. You pre-order, you drive through. We have the farmers market, you pre-order, you drive through. We've got scavenger hunts for kids to take a look at things. Incentives can be tricky, but there's a couple of things that you want to consider. Number one, what are your goals? In 2008, when I was working with Leyland Alliance and their Warwick Grove project, they had a number of speculative homes. They need to get rid of it. Cash is king. We actually introduced a friends and family program. It was not widely publicized, but it went to residents who might know somebody because they're a great source of referrals. And it went to a tight group of people, offering them a very special price. They sold the houses, they finished the project, they stayed in business where a lot of developers didn't. Consider a closing incentive so that your salespeople can if someone's on the fence, they can add a little something. The big thing is to really communicate, whether it's Pinewood Forest 5-point plan, Harkness Estates, again in Greenville, South Carolina, that's a legacy project. They reached out to everyone and said, hey guys, we're here for the long haul. This is a 20-year project. We have lots of grounds for you to come and hike, and we're going to be here for you. So they invite people to come and use their grounds. Bob Turner at Habersham, his staff is on the phone. Bob told me the other day, he said, Monica, he said, if they have a phone number, we don't email them. We pick up the phone and call them. He said, and what's more, he said, is we're not trying to sell them, which is so wonderful. He says, we're showing that we care. How are you during this pandemic? How have you been? Has your family been affected? I just wanted to check and see how you are. That is just so touching for people to know that you care about them. So his staff is busy. They're not seeing as many people come through the doors, but when they do see them, the conversion rate is higher, and making those phone calls is helpful, very personal for them. In closing, what I'd like to suggest is just make sure that your own house is in order. This may be the new normal. Realign your marketing plan. Don't spend stupid. I say that all the time. When something new comes across, compare it with how those dollars could be spent somewhere else. Talk to your friends, see what they're doing. Revise your job descriptions, and I advocate having job descriptions even if you outsource sales so that people know what's expected. But make certain that what are your new expectations? I'm a systems person. I believe strongly in something called CRMs, customer relationship management software. It is huge. Make certain that you're collecting that data, that you're reviewing it, you're analyzing it, you're reaching out. The CRM is your best friend. Big thing, just reach out and communicate. And that's all I have. Lynn, thank you again. And Lynn, if I could just give a quick pitch for this evening. The NTBA, our website is ntba.net. Our email is info@ntba.net. We will be having a deep dive on this conversation or on our NTBA member chat. Just email me for credentials and you'll get right on. Thank you, Lynn.
Oh, thank you, Monica, and thank you everyone else. And yes, it's now we all know that Rob Parker has a pet woodpecker. Who knew? So we don't know what that was. I have a couple of questions. Aaron, you talked about suburbanism and the cognitive dissonance that is going to come out from that. And I almost understood it, and you went through it really quickly, and it felt like it was a really important point, such as if local government officials are still seeing permits, then we're not really seeing a shrinkage. Can you please amplify that point, because it seemed essential?
Yeah, the longer I've been in this industry, it's been frustrating to recognize that cities just can't see the problems. If the permits are still coming through as they are in Atlanta or Oklahoma or in Durham, as long as there's permit and there's throughput from an elected perspective or a staff perspective, they say there can't be a problem. People are still applying for permits, almost independent of what those houses are, where they are, what their quality is, affordability, or anything. They can't process it. And I do think, again, it comes down to Nassim Nicholas Taleb's book, that to fix this problem requires you to be competent, which means you've read the zoning code, you understand design, you understand urbanism, and so forth, and have skin in the game, which is being a risk taker. And because of that, society is right now entirely reliant on cities fixing this. And to his point, and I agree with him, they're just completely not capable of doing it. I'm working on an entitlement project to do 10 homes in an urban street on an urban lot with a residential house on it. It will take not one, not two, but 3 special permissions processes to get that project entitled for 10 homes that are relatively affordable. I mean, it's beyond the pale, and we need to talk about it more.
Oh, thank you. We get this question every single webinar, and I want to, and I know it's already been answered privately by Grant, but I want to air it out, which is, in this time of social distancing, and particularly because New York City has been so hit, are people still going to want to live in cities? Are people still going to want to live in dense areas? I think the answer to that is a resounding yes, but let's hear it from the panelists on the defense of cities.
Yeah, I think density is not the ultimate culprit. You've got the biggest challenge for gateway cities, and the reason why I think you are and will see accelerated outmigration from gateway cities is affordability and quality of life. As we get into a post-COVID-19 dynamic with restaurants and cultural events and large-scale venues taken off of the table as public amenities, a lot of the quality of life that you find in an urban environment is stripped in this season. And so when you look at second-tier, tertiary markets, you can still find opportunities to live in good urbanism and practicing, whether it's in a multifamily or 4-plex or 6-plex, practicing dense living, urban living. But I think we'll have to figure out what are the best practices to apply the health guidelines that have been recommended and continue to practice social distancing even in that environment. The thing that scares me is, walk up multifamily is great. You're in stairs. It's the shared elevators, the shared doorknobs, the shared contact points. Those are the things that I think become very, very challenging in this next season.
Aaron, you do incremental development, and Rob, you're essentially building a T&D, 5,000 people opposite a film studio. Not one's very urban, one is in a more suburban location, but very dense. But Rob, you're seeing a lot of interest in Pinewood Forest. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there is a dynamic. We asked the question, are people going to want to go out to the country? Are they trying to get away from people? And I think what we're experiencing is that they're probably a little bit fearful of the city and the riding the elevator and all the things you have to touch in a multi-story building and that kind of connection. But a TND that is, with even the 10-foot separation in your houses, but one that's built with great public spaces and that has a sense of community, but also a sense of private courtyards and private space, so you can maintain good physical distancing, which we stopped talking about social distancing. Our people are totally social and solely connected socially. They're just not physically next to each other.
Right.
I believe it's actually speaking really strongly for what we're doing, and that it is the best of. All right, and yeah, it's not the scary stuff that you can't get away from, that you get coughed on in an elevator. It's outdoors, it's public space, it's private, and yet you have a sense of community and you're being looked out for and cared for. So I think we're going to continue to see people moving towards this.
I want to report that Bob Turner again at Habersham is seeing a lot of people who want to move to TNDs, and to Habersham as an example, he recently sold an entire block to a builder. They're developing smaller homes. So 12 to 1,400 feet. Single-story cottages to respond to that need.
Yeah, thanks.
Now, one of the articles that we discussed a couple weeks ago was how the major gateway cities are continuing to be hit hard with this outmigration. An encouraging element in that article, it talked about walkable communities that are within, it mentioned 45 minutes drive from the urban core, and so it's skipping over the suburban greenbelt development pattern, going out and establishing urban densities in greenfield locations that have proximity to the cities, and that was something, and it's not proven yet. I mean, we're seeing this is proven in Carlton Landing. We're 2 hours from Oklahoma City, an hour and a half from Tulsa, 3 hours from Dallas. We've seen a surge in the short window that we have as a small sample size, but we're seeing the market respond to that, where they have a strong sense of community in a place that feels like it's not surrounded by a sense of health fear. You're surrounded by nature, and there's room to get out, but there's also a place to find community. So
what do you all see as design changes or design? How might you redesign or finesse the design of some of your developments? I was speaking to a building official in Fairfax County, and they're seeing a bunch of permits come in about how offices are going to be redesigned. Gone are the open spaces, gone are the small cubicles, more space needed to create those offices to get that built-in social distancing. Yet on the other side, we're seeing everyone's projecting that no one's going to go back to work anymore. So what kind of design changes are you anticipating, Rob? Pinewood Forest is only partially built out. Grant, you're about halfway built out. What kind of design changes are you anticipating?
So we've got some opportunity because our primary investor and founder is the chairman and CEO of Chick-fil-A. They are, a trusted provider, and they've gone all in for testing, for cleanliness, et cetera. Our founder has challenged us to become the cleanest town you could live in, and so. For us, it's already where can we put wash stations right on the town? Where can we put hand washing? What kind of surfaces can we use? We talked about this on an NTBA call. Copper doesn't transmit some of this. Do we use more copper? Do we find other surfaces that don't do that? I don't think we want to overreact to this single incident. I mean, there are threats to our society that are great. We've all forgotten about mass shootings and all other kinds of terrorism and all the kinds of things that happen. So I think within reason, we want to make some adjustments. I think part of it's lifestyle that's consistent with the healthy living we've already been talking about, and just add in some other key elements so that you can physically distance, so you can keep your hands clean. We do look forward to a day when we're not walking around with masks on, and hope that's not part of what the solution is. But I think there are some things we can do. And Grant, you may have other thoughts.
I just think in looking at how's the built environment going to change and adapt to this on a large scale, vertically integrated mixed use was already challenged before
absolutely.
this. We've loved the idea of, residential over storefront, or mixing in 3 or 4 different property types into one structure. We love the idea of that. That's always been an uphill battle. We're going against the current. In this case, it's even more challenged. On a small scale, we've got keypads that provide access into community amenities and things like that. We're shifting into an RFID system so that everybody will have a card or a wristband that'll allow them to get in without touch. So we're looking at all those touch points and saying, what do we need to do to give people assurance that we're watching out for them?
Yeah. And I think that the design side, I think we're going to see a huge demand in accessory structures. This is a little bit the scale I work at is more the micro level scale of what Grant showed potentially at Carlton Landing. And it's interesting. I'm trying to come up with a softer name for what Andres described as a compound, because I would be immediately written off at my city if I proposed, focusing on compounds. But it's really all it is really is I think that the best way to look at them are co-housing communities with a totally different software that has a patriarch or a matriarch who owns it, who's responsible for it, who's a leader, independent of how good or bad they are. That's just the legal structure. And there's going to be a tremendous opportunities for software development to, like, using an iPhone potentially to develop and manage these communities that may have 3, 5, 10 units in it, these micro communities. I think the simplest path to even test these are already going on through accessory structures. And, we talk about them a little bit in the CNU, but just accessory dwellings out back, garage over apartments, or even in Oregon, Minneapolis, and Durham, Fayetteville, where people are allowing duplexes plus ADUs, you can actually start to implement this concepts by right already. And you can create these little 3 to 6 unit sort of micro communities. I think that's going to be absolutely a huge thing in the next 10 years.
I would agree. I'm seeing here at East Beach a couple of things that were interesting. Number one, we're getting a lot of ICU physicians who are renting the carriage houses. And some of the residents are so generous, they're even waiving the rent to do their share for this pandemic. We're also seeing some of the family houses being built with different little areas, separate bathrooms, separate bedrooms, so that their families can come. We have a new urbanist, Diane Dorney, for example, lives here with her husband. Her entire family is here, all in a different area of her house. So we're seeing a lot of that. Andres the other day sent me an article about bubbles. He said, will you be in my bubble? It was the article. And it's about creating safe groups of people that you feel comfortable with and not the stranger danger. He gave the example of people that he knows are very safely social distancing, that they feel comfortable enough to have a dinner with them. So these smaller groups of bubbles really are ideal for these communities that we're creating.
But Monica, push back.
Circle of trust.
But could these social bubbles actually lead to more exclusion? As we are grappling with issues around inclusion and equity, and how can we create places that are accessible for a greater range of folks, I completely see where Andreas went to, and I myself have my own, kind of social bubble. But how then can we reconcile these?
I don't think I'm all about inclusion philosophically, but I don't think that you can try to see inclusion grow in this season of COVID-19. I just think it's a tsunami of people caring about their own private condition and looking out for those closest to them. And so not in a cliquey and status or class directed way. And I think that, you're going to see people, it goes beyond all the dividing lines that we've been fragmented, our society's been fragmented by before. It's down honestly to the nuclear level, where you're seeing people and those who are closest to them figuring out how to do life together. It could be family, or it could be people within a very close community, but it's probably less than 15 people, who are choosing to do life together and figuring out who their closest friends are.
Yeah, I would add it this way. I would say that, there's a hierarchy of needs that we've got, right? And we're at a very basic need right now. And it's a much more enlightened concern about inclusion. I think that during this season, when we talk about phasing back in, we've talked about, rather than which restaurants or whether we would go to the barbershop or whatever, our phasing has been, we have our core family unit. We have that, probably that social bubble that we feel comfortable with that we'll probably start going to next, right? That group, if you're in a church, it's a small group or whatever. And then that circle will get larger as we gain more confidence. There are, for some, I don't think until we have a vaccine that they're going to be, really comfortable going out deeply into it. I think it's a great point though, Lynn, because if we use this as the new normal and we don't get back to a higher level of consciousness about this, and we don't get more back to that higher state, then we do run the risk of just segmenting and dividing off. And that's the ice age thing that I don't think we want to spend much time in, and get out of that as quick as we can.
I think there's a really wide open door for compassion, for generosity, for concern, for neighborliness, and those that people have been too busy to take time to really actually put into practice. Now everyone realizes their need, and there's really just an open door for that type of generosity.
I'd like to just tell, I'm sorry, go ahead, Grant.
Go ahead. No, go for it.
I just wanted to share a little story. So last Saturday night, there were 5 couples who went into the park across the street. Again, I live in East Beach, and we had our chairs probably 8 or 10 feet apart. And 2 instances happened. One of our residents has a very sick husband, stopped to chat with my husband, again, 6 feet away, about signs for end of life. And that was a touching moment when she had a need. There was also a young girl, a young teenager who saw us talking, and we had a few of us had our dogs out there. She went back to her house, got to her dog, and sat on the sidewalk to join us. So again, it was inclusive of these 2 things, and I think that's what we do, is we care about each other.
Yeah.
Grant, a couple of questions have come in directed to you. They're very, very similar, which is, how would you hope that your proposed development of half unit look over several generations? And Ann Daigle asked a very similar question about what will happen over the decades.
Yeah, sure. So, I think if you go in and you just put it to half-acre lots and you sell them like that, Ann's point was, that's the beginning of sprawl. That's how this happens. And whether it's half-acre or 5-acre, if you don't have the right coding in place, then you're going to be left with something that's unusable 2 generations from now, and devaluing. And so what we're proposing is minimum size of a half-acre lots, because that allows us to do it with septic in the first phase, putting a band around the perimeter of each lot, so there's not just a setback, but a build-to line, where you're pushing your home unit to the edge, and it creates a frame of contiguous space inside the block, which lends itself to this courtyard design. So if you think of a Japanese courtyard home, where you come in and you have a private shared, it's shared with the people who are in your tribe, whether that's family or close friends that you've decided to sell building rights to on your lot. You're going to create an outdoor space that lets you connect with the sunlight and fresh air and the people that you've allowed in the fold. It's not shared in the community sense, but it's shared in the people that you've let into the fold. I think, and the other thing that we're seeing is an opportunity to hand over development rights. So how does it look 2 generations from now? It looks appropriate. If the market is there, it's going to be built out. If the market's not there, it's going to be balanced. And so you're not going to have a great deal of risk and desired product causing values to go down. And you're going to, if it's supposed to be built out, it will, but the people have the development rights, and the developer then, we're looking at the time value of money. We wouldn't develop that out for another 10 years. And so I'm looking at it and saying, let's go ahead and harvest, monetize this value now, hand it off to other people, and have the right coding in place to guide their steps.
And I wanted to chime in on that I think that's fascinating and somewhat courageous and well, it's actually historical, but ahistorical to new urbanism. One of my original frustrations with new urbanism is most of these were, many TNDs are sort of master planned, where the maker makes all of these decisions, juxtaposed from the historical neighborhoods, which I've spent most of my career working in, which were platted and then handed over to people to evolve as the market needed. There were fewer options then, but that created this like perfect real-time mechanism devolving to the end user closer to it that was a bit more organic. And for whatever reasons, we stopped developing that way. But I think that there are an extraordinary amount of, yet to be learned benefits from doing that. And, we get out and experiment, and we don't know what it'll look like in 2 generations, but we believe it'll be more specific to the owners there than necessarily the master developer. And that's great.
And the idea of controlling your own destiny is powerful. And people, if you give them a sense that they could sell off parts of their lot in a way to eventually have a zero basis in their land, that's a powerful idea for people.
Final question for you all, and you can use this to wrap in your final comments. But Aaron, it was something that you said, that it is possible that in the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to see a slowdown in the development community. We're not seeing it now, but there's going to be a delay. For all the developers and for folks involved in the development industry, what advice would you give them now on how they can strengthen their business to create a stronger dynamic for themselves when that downturn hits? So everyone's working like a fiend now, and then it's just going to hit. What would you suggest to them, or what would you recommend to them when that downturn hits? What can they do to increase their business?
Yeah, I think the short answer is partner up. And it's a two-way street, that developers can partner with restaurateurs or architects and try to spread that risk around. Ultimately, good urbanism requires that people have skin in the game. It comes back to that. And it actually, I would approach it almost from the other side. When architects or activists or planners see this downturn coming as well, it's the perfect opportunity to become small developers, which will make you better at your primary profession, but also have equity. And this is what equity is. It is stakeholding is literal. If you can own something in your community, that's what ownership and equity is. So trying to partner up and be vested in your community helps you weather downturns, but also just makes you a better community member.
Yeah, my 2 cents, I'd say know the cost of holding and know how long you can stay in the game before you need to make a tough call. A lot of times people don't estimate how much it actually costs to hold and to not step forward. And they also underestimate how long this season's going to last. If we're seeing default rates peak in the fourth quarter of 21, it is going to be a long slog. It's going to weed out a lot of folks that are over levered or not as well heeled as maybe they need to be. As we looked at development activity, I think it already has come to a screeching halt. You're seeing some home building activity continue to go on. People are planning, people are talking about ideas for the future, but on larger scale projects, we've seen that come to a screech about 45 days ago. So.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's one is we talked about preserving cash and staying liquid as best you can, spreading that for as long as you can to be able to hold. I would also get creative in how you value your time without devaluing what you do. If you can defer, if you can be part of projects where you defer and you use your time as your equity to be part to expand and to partner with other people. There are actually, I didn't talk about it before, we're actually people who are doing better during this time who have some capacity to defer their billing and to hold off so we can keep moving on some things. So I would encourage there. And then I got to tell you, I am just so encouraged that the foundation of our economy was very, very strong before. It could come back very, very quickly. We're excited about that idea that it might, but you can't plan on a hope and a wish. So, but I am encouraged that this could, if we're wise about it, and the housing market is in such better and different condition than 2007. I'm encouraged that if we can hang on a bit, that it's going to come around. I guess the only other thing I would add is that costs are down. Concrete's costs are dropping, and that craziness that we've experienced about labor shortages and costs through the roof are going to correct, and so there may be an opportunity there as well.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing in this season, there's always something that you could find that's positive, things that come out of it. There's opportunities to be found. The people that win in the season are the people that look at it with a fresh perspective. You're right, Rob.
Monica, any last
Sure.
thoughts?
Well, for the communication side, I would say keep in touch with the market, really understand what's going on, speak to other developers, speak to your prospects, the influencers, and then reach out, listen, and respond accordingly.
Excellent. I want to thank each and every one of you again for giving us your incredible insights. I took a ton of notes, so thank you all. And again, Monica, if you want to continue this conversation tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern, reach out to Monica. These same 4 speakers will be diving in to do a deeper dive. Thank you everyone for listening. Next week, we're going to be discussing, next week, we're going to be discussing planning for the declining ownership society. Todd Zimmerman is going to be leading that conversation. Don't, again, forget to register for CNU 28 for more conversations on Zoom. And I'm just so happy to see Grant and Rob and Aaron. And I just want to give you all just a really big hug. So thank you all for joining this. Thank you all for participating, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.